Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today's Saturday. I was going to say September 6th, 2025. And Trump is an FBI informant. Interesting. I think it's implied that he was FBI informing on Epstein, but I don't think that's the whole story. And I've got more on that for you today. Replace the old Home Secretary with a new one in the United Kingdom. And it's creating civil unrest, which I mean is not surprising at all. Bail reform. With bail reform comes the Online Harms Act. I feel they're going to offer up bail reform and package it inside the Online Harms Act, so the Online Harms Act passes, and the conservatives will say, "Oh yes, this is very necessary, and this is the correct move," and so on and so forth. And we'll have the Online Harms Act, and we'll start arresting people for things they say online. And then the conservatives will say, "Hold on, that's not what we meant," but it'll be a fake fight because they supported it all along. So I hope that I'm wrong about that and that we don't go down this path. But it seems like we are going down this path, and it's not good. It's not good. Fake news for a hunting ban in Nova Scotia. I think there's no hunting ban. I can't find any Google News about this. If you see this as an official announcement, you let me know. But apparently last week there was a New Brunswick. New Brunswick is canceling the deer hunting season this season because of the potential for fire problems. And this is for Nova Scotia now, and it's saying the same thing, but there's some concerning things. So I'm warning you about fake news circulating. Be wary, everybody. And Mark Carney yesterday announced on a Friday the end of the EV mandate for next year. So next year, they were going to say 20% of all cars sold in Canada had to be electric vehicles. And the manufacturers said, we can't do that. The only way we can meet those demands is if we reduce the overall number of cars sold in Canada to meet 20% electric sold and then not sell any more cars. That's the only way to do it. We will not be able to increase the number of cars sold to 20% of the current level. You won't see that many cars sold. And so the government blinked, but not enough. They're only backing down on next year's 20% mandate. The EV mandate's still in effect. The electric car mandate is still in effect. All of that mandate is all still in effect. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, here's Mark Carney talking about the EV mandate and how he's repealing that. And I've got Polyev right after to say this is not nearly enough. And Danielle Smith as well responding and reacting to all of this. So here's Mark Carney talking about the EV mandate that is rescinded a little bit, just a little tiny bit.
And it's not all about money. Some of it is about regulation. So to add flexibility to the automotive sector, we will remove the 2026 electric vehicle availability standard, which specifies the share of new vehicle sales that must be electric next year. This will provide immediate financial relief to automakers at a time of increased pressure on their competitiveness. And the government will begin immediately a 60-day review of the EV standard to identify future flexibilities and ways to reduce costs. And we'll advance new options to bring more and more affordable electric vehicles to Canadians.
Canadians don't want electric vehicles. I mean, some Canadians do, but by and large, Canadians are voting with their wallets, and what they want is a car that gasses up in minutes for 500-kilometer range, not a half an hour for 200 or 150-kilometer range or anything like that. They want the ease of the system we've got now, not the ridiculousness of a system that doesn't work, and it doesn't seem like it will work. Ryan says Polyev is right. No one's going to invest in the auto sector with only a year delay on mandates. The Liberals at any moment can pull the rug out on any decision, and this indecisiveness keeps potential investment away. What would you do if you owned Ford Motor Company and Donald Trump is promising you can build plants on site that you run to generate energy for your own factories and build it in the USA, and we'll give you all sorts of tax incentives, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, you won't have to pay Canadian taxes, et cetera, et cetera. And in the face of all of that, the uncertainty in Canada doesn't look like an attractive business decision, right? Even if you've got years of operating here. I mean, the speech laws alone are concerning enough for anybody with sense to be looking at other options, because jeepers creepers. But also anybody with sense comes to the conclusion of, where else can I go? Have you looked at the mess England's in? Have you looked at the mess everywhere else is in? Even blue states. Some blue states are worse than the Canadian provinces. So man, like sometimes things are okay in some of the places in the United States, but also it's got its issues too. And so nowhere's perfect is all I'm trying to say. Here's Polyev talking about the very unfriendly business practices being, I think, utilized by the LPC as a weapon against our own economy. Why would they do this? We'll get to that before the end of this segment. Here we go.
Gas-powered vehicles, calling for them to be banned by 2030 in his book, Values, which, by the way, was much more aggressive than Trudeau's plan to ban them in 2035. He's finally admitted that the Conservatives were right, just like we were right on the carbon tax. But he's doing a clumsy retreat, saying that he's going to delay this mandate. So now, businesses who would otherwise consider investing in automaking here in Canada will have to put that investment on hold while Mark Carney dithers for another year to try and figure out how he can ban people from putting gas and diesel in their trucks and cars. Mark Carney can't even get his flip-flops right. But this really has been, as I said yesterday, the Seinfeld summer for Mark Carney, a big show about nothing. You know, I think specifically about George Costanza. You remember George Costanza? He was a legend. George Costanza had this great episode where he had this fancy, high-paying job with a corner office, and he didn't do any work, like literally none, but he wanted to look busy. So he would storm up and down the hallways carrying file folders. He would leave the lights on in his car in front of the office building on the weekend, even though he wasn't there. He would yell into the phone, even though no one was on the other end of the line. And they kept paying him because he looked so busy. I have to admit, Mark Carney has looked really busy this summer. He's been flying off to Europe to sign declarations of intent that actually mean absolutely nothing. He's been holding roundtables with other politicians. You've seen politicians patting each other on the back, congratulating themselves on all the excellent meetings they've been holding. There have been letters written to ministers that then get leaked to media and are reported with great fanfare on front pages everywhere. My goodness, he's almost as busy and as useless as George Costanza. It has been a big show about nothing.
I can't disagree. He could have been tighter on the whole EV mandate thing, though. Here's Danielle Smith. She says, for years, Alberta has called on the federal government to get rid of their eco-radical policies, including the EV mandate. In recent months, premiers and industry leaders from across the country have joined our call to end the EV mandate. The federal government should not be dictating what cars Canadians can and cannot drive. This kind of market interference will only drive out costs for everyday Albertans and Canadians. Although I'm encouraged by Prime Minister Carney's decision today to pause the federal government's unrealistic and ill-fated EV mandate, it's not enough. The EV mandate must be scrapped entirely, along with other bad laws that are holding our country back. Today's decision is the first of many that must be made to create the investor certainty we need to unleash Canada's economic potential. If we want Canada to be economically stronger, the federal government must immediately repeal all of the Trudeau-era laws that restrict resource development and have shattered investor confidence, including the oil and gas emissions cap, Bill C-69, the tanker ban, the net zero power regulations, and the censorship measures imposed on our energy companies. Until all these policies are changed, repealed, or canceled, we will not attract the capital to keep our energy industry growing and competing globally. Yes, but I think that that's fundamentally the plan. I think that they don't want us to be competitive. They want us to need a bailout by the IMF. And the IMF says, okay, we'll bail you out, but we get 10%, 20%, 50% of future oil revenue because we're bailing you out right now, or something like that. We're going to sell our country piecemeal to the international globalists, and they'll have us over a barrel because they own the government anyway, and then they'll own us financially, and people will not necessarily understand that they own the government, but they'll own us on the front end and the back end, right? So people will say, oh yeah, well, that's because of the austerity, because of the IMF bailout. And then you go, oh, right. Not, oh, the sneaky politicians stealing our money for useless mandates and bad policies. No. This is on the front end. IMF bailout. We were, quote, bad. We mismanaged our country and money, and the IMF needed to bail us out, and now austerity. And you can blame it on that, and people will accept that. And not that it's a good thing, but it's human nature, I think. Here's gov.exe. He says, Mark Carney just said our relationship with the United States has become a liability, and so we must respond by being our own best customer and transitioning to a net zero carbon economy. So net zero is going to be its own little series of tabs, but this all relates. This is a global push. It is, I think, not a real problem, but these people are all behaving as if it's a real problem in order to usher in their ideology and their plan. And we wouldn't comply unless there was a, quote, reason, like global warming, a global reason for us to all act globally in lockstep on these people's orders. And these people don't have our best interests at heart, I don't think. And other people think so too. And again, I'm going to show you before the end of this series of tabs. So Mark Carney just said our relationship with the United States. Why would Mark Carney try and sour our relationship with the United States? That's a terrible idea. That's not a good idea for a prime minister to do. Does Mark Carney want everyone poor, homeless, and starving? Because that's what will happen. Okay, so here's Mark Carney talking about the relationship between Canada and the United States and how we have to be our own best customer. Here we go.
We have just come from 2 days of our federal cabinet convening in North York, and we spent those days with a clear focus on delivering our overarching mission in this time of crisis. Our overarching mission is to build Canada's economic strength in face of unprecedented change. What's going on is not a transition, it's a rupture. And its effect will be profound. We can't rely on our most important trading partner as we once did. So our relationship with the United States, so essential for so many industries, was once one of our greatest strengths, and in many cases, in certain sectors, has become a vulnerability. This disruption calls for a bold new approach. In being our own best customer by buying Canadian. Our new government is embarking on an ambitious plan to secure a new era of prosperity out of this age of adversity. We will soon also release our climate competitiveness strategy to position Canada as a leader in decarbonization and the necessity, the imperative of a shift to a greener economy.
So we'll blame Trump and then shove all this climate communism down your throats. And that's unfortunately where we're going. Here's Nate. And again, this is climate change related, forest fire related. I saw this going around and I got quite black-pilled about it. And I was like, oh man, this is terrible. But it seems like it could be fake. Nate says, due to extreme fire risk conditions, the priority of protecting both communities and forested lands, all hunting activities are suspended until further notice. But the Nova Scotia letterhead is low quality. It doesn't look like it's high quality. It's all blurry and it's got a public notice. And it's just overall, there's something hinky about this. So if you see an official, Michael says, I think this is fake. If you see an official one, send it my way and I'll correct this report, but I am calling fake news on this. Could this be a test? Like how would they react? Or is this just some troll who's trying to cause an explosion? Now this is dated September 3rd. I didn't see anything like this when I searched this up. Nothing came up. So it's be wary, be aware of what's around, right? And double check, even me, right? Even me. Sometimes I get things wrong because I thought it was real for a good hour, right? And then people messaged me and Chris said, hey man, I think this is fake. And I was like, oh yeah, it totally is fake. So wild stuff, man. Table Salt says, major breaking: government in Canada are now hiding the locations of forests that are being sprayed with glyphosate. We are onto something big here. Keep pushing. They work for us. So activists question, this is Nova Scotia, and I believe this to be real. Table Salt is usually quite reliable, and the byline is somebody from CBC News. So like you can see this, you can search this up. Activists question why Nova Scotia no longer disclosing glyphosate spray locations. Forestry sector feels unfairly targeted by activists who've established encampments in years past. So the glyphosate thing is being withheld, and that's very interesting. Mark Nixon is underlining the climate pivot, and he says, Mark Carney just said it, Canada's economy is going full tilt into decarbonization. This is his vision for the strongest economy in the world. The Earth is bailing on the green scam. Carney's plan for Canada is to lead the charge straight off a cliff. This is the end of Canada. And so I've already shown you this clip. He's saying, we're gonna double down and go into this and be our own best customer and lead in decarbonization. And it's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. I showed you yesterday the QR codes, and I speculated on why you would need the information on the QR codes. And the only reason you'd need the information on the QR codes, I think I showed you the QR codes. If not, they're coming up in today's show. But the only reason you'd need the QR codes is if they gave you a limit on how many widgets you are allowed to have, carbon credits per month, right? And so if you have 100 carbon credits per month and meat is 25 carbon credits per tube of beef or whatever, then, well, you better be able to scan that thing and know how many carbon credits that thing is. And nope, no thanks, man. Not going to happen. But that's what they're pushing, and we need to stop it. If we don't, it's going to continue. Right? It is absolutely going to continue. Canada Proud is highlighting this. Multiple listed terrorist groups such as Hezbollah, Baba Kasha, and Hamas are raising money in Canada through drug trafficking, auto theft, and other illegal activities, according to records released by the Department of Finance. And again, I think this goes to destabilizing Canada. It's not quite climate related, but it's part and parcel of destabilizing Canada. And Whitney Webb says, Canada and other places are being run by a Meta-Cartel. Here she is talking about the Meta-Cartel, and then I'm going to jump to the end because she names Carney in this, but not until 2 minutes later. So here's the beginning of this.
As deep as I went in writing those two books, and you could certainly go deeper. It basically shows that, the world is basically run by a Meta-Cartel.
Explain that.
They basically take those over, and then HSBC gets exposed. I forget. I think that it wasn't the Panama Papers, but it was like one of those consortium of journalists that published these leaks, basically revealed a lot of prominent people that were part of these HSBC Swiss accounts that had been inherited from Safra. Epstein was one of them. Some associates of Epstein, like Flavio Briatore, are there. But also, HSBC was laundering money for drug cartels. And who didn't go after them when they were in charge of the Bank of England? Mark Carney, who is now Prime Minister of Canada.
And everyone's leaving.
And while he was head of the Bank of England, there's pictures of him hanging out with Ghislaine. Who's, Father Robert Maxwell was banked by Safra, among other things. So.
Well, I remember.
So there's uncomfortable, right? She's talking about a whole big group of people who are plotting things. She called it a Meta-Cartel, right? And she's implying that Mark Carney's a part of this Meta-Cartel. That's probably concerning. Here's Liz Truss saying, yeah, well, if you change the figurehead like Canada just did with Trudeau and replaced for Mark Carney, that's not going to fix the problem. And here we are, problem not fixed. And she says the problem is it's a Meta-Cartel. She doesn't use the word Meta-Cartel, but she describes a Meta-Cartel. Here we go.
Problem. And so if you got rid of Rachel Reeves, I don't know if you think she should go, but if she was to go...
I don't think it matters if she goes, because I believe that it's the institutions like the Treasury, the Bank of England, the OBR, they've been ideologically captured. Yeah. They believe in big spending, big taxation. They believe in net zero. The Bank of England has been championing net zero as well. The whole lot of them have to be disproved, and they have to be... So it's not good enough just to replace a person number 11. You've actually got to replace the whole.
Well, this is what I was going to get on to next, because the Bank of England also championed gender-neutral toilets in the midst of all of this madness that was going on.
Well, they've all adopted it. And look at the former governor, Mark Carney, and what's happened to him.
Right.
So he came to Britain. He did a terrible job. Yeah. Quantitative easing, which essentially lifted asset prices, created inflation, goes to Canada, has become a very woke Prime Minister in Canada, original, World Economic Forum young leader. I mean, these people are circulating these jobs around the West, and they're ruining Western economies.
Yeah, they all.
She names the cartel, the Young Global Leaders WEF cartel. They're all circulating. They're ruining Western economies. Isn't that interesting, right? So Whitney Webb comes to the same conclusion as former Prime Minister of England, Liz Truss, and we are caught holding the bag. Darn, right? That sucks for us. And so how long will we let it continue? How long will we let this cartel run Canada instead of having our own country run by people who actually want the best for our country and our countrymen and women? It's very concerning. Here's Timon Van Lindbergh. They say British Columbia's mother has been served exclusion papers from setting foot on school premises for her Facebook post, questioning why a teacher would wear the pride flag on this shirt. the day after the school shooting in the United States. If you don't comply, they will exclude you. Yes, this is the weapons they use. This was our grab bag of governance, but it was very Carney centric. I just wanted to get this in there. And this is the mother. After a trans-identified, heavily medicated psycho premeditated the murder of 2 school kids in Minneapolis just last week, an ideologue teacher at my son's school has chosen to rock the extremist, misogynist, homophobic flag of their shared secular religion on the first day back. So weird, right? Like, it's a very, very strange thing. And then I read you the letter yesterday talking about how if she continued with this, I think I read the letter. I shared this yesterday. I'm sure of it. And it was a whole legal cease and desist for posting this, right? And that's absolutely wild, saying like our policies and human rights allow this person to express themselves and blah, 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 blah. But that's pretty tone deaf considering the post, I think. Here is Larry Brock talking about crime. And this is, we'll do this and then I've got to say goodbye to the stream. This is near and dear to Guelph. So Larry Brock says an 80-year-old woman was left with life-threatening injuries after a brutal attack in downtown Guelph. A man is now charged with attempted murder. But according to Minister Fraser, Canada is not the Wild West, but our seniors who are being targeted in broad daylight on our streets don't believe that. The Canadians deserve a justice system that protects our most vulnerable, the elderly, families, and communities. Yeah, well, our justice system is being weaponized against people like, not exactly like me, but people like Tamara Litch, people like Chris Barber, people who dare to stand, Kean Bext, right? People who dare to stand up and publish things, and then boom, you get tied up in court for years. You get thrown in jail for potentially years if you're in Coots, 48 days if you're Tamara Litch. And all of this is very inappropriate because the criminals, the actual criminals, are allowed to operate with impunity. And that's scary. Here's Guelph Today, or Cotting Guelph, not Guelph Today, Cotting Guelph, and they're highlighting the attempted murder charge downtown Guelph. The Guelph police are saying that the people were known to each other, but I don't know how well known to each other. And because the people were known to each other, there's no threat to public safety. Don't worry, nobody's going to murder you downtown. Just 80-year-old women who cross these 34-year-old men. That's the real issue here. Guelph man is charged with attempted murder after an 80-year-old woman was severely injured downtown Sunday morning. Approximately 9:40 a.m., emergency services were called to the area of Wyndham Street North and Macdonnell Street, where they found the woman unconscious on the sidewalk. The victim was transported to hospital with life-threatening injuries. The suspect fled the scene before officers arrived, but was later identified and arrested Sunday night, because Guelph has cameras downtown, I believe. 34-year-old Guelph man is charged with attempted murder and aggravated assault. He will appear in bail court Wednesday. It's believed that the two had met previously, but were not close acquaintances. A 34-year-old had met an 80-year-old at some point in the past. And so they're not close acquaintances, but they met. So they say there's no ongoing threat to public safety. Okay, sure. The incident remains under investigation. Anyone with information, blah, 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 blah. Wild and crazy stuff going on when 80-year-old women are being attacked in broad daylight in Guelph. Guelph used to be a mafia city, and I was under the impression that you didn't do anything untowards towards old ladies because you didn't know whose mother they were, and if it was the wrong family, then you could be in a lot of trouble. And it wasn't like